Very good afternoon to the viewers. Today we have very interesting topic to be deliberated through webinar mode. We have research methodology, hypothesis, formulations. To justify this topic, we have presence of Dr. Susmita Mukhopadhyay. She is from IIT Kharagpur. We have presence of our very learned chairman, CA Dr. Anuj Goyalji with us. So let me introduce first my chairman. My chairman is a member of all three professional institutions like CA, CS, ICWA. His doctorate, his LLB, his MCOM, and so many other qualifications to his credit. So I think he is the right person who would be taking the ice-breaking session, and he would be justifying with this topic as a session chairman and as a ice-breaking keynote address. We have the presence of very learned speaker of the day, Madam Dr. Susmita Mukhopadhyay. She is Associate Professor of Organization Behavior and HRM in the Vinod Gupta School of Management, IIT Kharagpur. Her academic qualifications possess PhD in Organization Behavior from ISI Kolkata and MSc in Applied Psychology. She is taking session for various PSUs, RBI, Indian Air Force, MSME, and many other institutions. So we welcome you, ma'am, as a session speaker. We also have presence of our vice chairman, CA Kothai Srinivas, who would be joining very shortly with us. Before that, for a keynote address and ice-breaking session, I would request my chairman, CA Dr. Anuj Goyalji, for his words of wisdom.
Thank you, Dr. Amit Agarwal, sir, our Honorable Secretary of this very, very important research committee of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, the oldest technical committee of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, formed way back in 1955. We are having the presence of our very, very prominent resource person, our faculty, Dr. Susmita Mukhopadhyay, ma'am. She is the professor from IIT Kharagpur. And I welcome all our honorable viewers, all our honorable delegates who are present from each and every part of the country, rather outside country also. And friends, as we are very well aware that as far as this research committee is concerned, during last 3-4 years, we have taken n number of initiatives to see that how we can really do something very, very concrete, not only for the profession, but also for the nation. Friends, as one prominent researcher, Neil Armstrong aptly stated, research creates new knowledge. And this demonstrates the significance of research as a tool for increasing knowledge and boosting learning by realizing prospective ideas. The Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, as all of us must be aware, is the world's biggest professional organization of the chartered accountants, and it has always worked for the best interest of all its stakeholders and always assisted the government in its endeavors and always been a partner in nation building. The Institute of Chartered Accountants of India has achieved recognition as a premier accounting body, not only in the country, but also globally, for maintaining highest standards in technical and ethical areas. The ICI is growing leaps and bounds in the areas of research and marching towards its vision of growing as a research-led institution. Friends, the Research Committee of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, with a view to undertake research activities, was established way back in 1955, as I have already communicated to you, to improve the quality of the services rendered by the profession. Friends, research is a collaborative effort that draws on the unique knowledge and viewpoints of the outstanding minds. I'm pleased to see that chartered accountants are leaving no stone unturned in the domain of the research, where they are contributing via their unique expertise in the discipline of accounting auditing, taxation, finance, and other related areas. Today, in the session of the webinar series, in the second session of this webinar series, we will be discussing hypothesis formulation. A research hypothesis is the basis upon which scientific investigation is built, and the formulation of a research hypothesis is an important step in outlining the direction of the research. It is like selecting a compass for a long and difficult journey. It directs our efforts, frames our inquiries, and gives the framework for comprehending the unknown. Hence, research is critical in helping us comprehend and adapt to new discoveries as we traverse an ever-changing environment. It allows us to identify and capitalize on new trends and to anticipate and mitigate potential risks. The webinar is further expected to provide guidance on literature review concepts and theories, formulation of hypothesis, test of hypothesis, etc., which will enable participants to contribute to the research area with improved knowledge for further research investigation and future research investigation. On that basis, I am confident that this webinar will help members to sharpen their research methodology abilities. And you must be very well aware about the research committee and its initiatives. We are having this ICI Award for Excellence in Financial Reporting, which was initiated by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India way back in 1958. And in this 65 years of journey, I think ICI Award for Excellence in Financial Reporting is that award for which each and every corporate, the biggest of the biggest corporate, do dream that they can be the part of the awardees. And this ICI Award for Excellence in Financial Reporting is there to recognize and reward organizations that rigorously adhere to the reporting practice, accounting principles, and other laws. Last year, there was a resounding success, followed by the highest number of applications received, that is 262 from various entities in different sectors, which were being assessed by eminent jury panel. And I will request all the delegates to ensure that how we can get the best of the entries this year also. We are having 15th of October is the last date, and we know that generally corporates also do come at the last moment. So I will request through you that best of the corporates can be the part of this ICI Award for Excellence in Financial Reporting, and they can submit their nomination by 15th of October, before 15th of October 2023. This year we are going to have this ICI Award for Excellence in Financial Reporting at Raipur, the capital city of the state of Chhattisgarh, in the month of January. 10th of January we are having? 13th of January 2024 we are having this award ceremony. Then very important initiative of the research committee, ICI International Research Award. I think for the first time in the history of the accounting profession, any accounting body has come out for the ICI International Research Award. And friends, in the year in which Corona pandemic was there, we initiated and ultimately implemented ICI International Research Award. And you will be very happy to know that during the very first year, as well as second year and third year, the president of the International Federation of Accountants, IFAC president, was the jury chairman. And we are trying our level best to see that how the scholars, researchers, professionals, and academicians can be the part of this competition in the domains of accounting, auditing, economics, finance, and taxation if they have made the research, and that research is the published research. This year we have received the highest number of nominations, that is 172 nominations from each and every part of the world. The award ceremony this year is going to be held at Dubai on 19th of October. In Dubai, you are very well aware that in the Gulf countries, we are having very, very strong presence of the members of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. And through our members of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, we are contributing in a great way for the development of the research activities in other parts of the world also, and to see that how the economy of that country can be strengthened. And I think the Gulf countries are the example before all of us. Then we initiated ICI Research Project Scheme. It is an open round scheme launched by the research committee for the researchers who are keen to undertake research in accounting and other related fields. And we do reimburse up to rupees 10 lakhs for the research projects, which are very, very important for the profession and in turn for the nation. Then ICI Doctoral Scholarship Scheme is another initiative in which the members who are keen to pursue PhD and are not more than 40 years of age can be the part of this ICI Doctoral Scholarship Scheme. And a scholarship will be awarded to registered PhD scholars from any recognized university to pursue and complete their doctoral research in auditing, taxation, commerce, management, and accounting. And we do have the provision of the scholarship of rupees 75,000 rupees per month for 3 years to the eligible researchers. Then we had initiative of the short-term research studies during this 75th year of the formation of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. And this study provides a platform for sharing new ideas, innovative research findings, and thought-provoking insights on various contemporary topics to CA members. And friends, the research committee also formulates guidance notes on accounting aspects which are issued under the authority of the council. It also brings out technical guides, studies, etc. on generally accepted accounting principles. So, friends, I will not be taking your further time because we are very, very eager to hear our learned guest speaker, Dr. Susmita Mukhopadhyay ji, who is a very, very learned professor of IIT Kharagpur from the School of Management. And I welcome our vibrant speaker of the day, who will be sharing her knowledge on hypothesis formulation with the audience. And I once again welcome all our honorable delegates on behalf of the research committee, on behalf of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, Chairman, sir, for your nice words of wisdom. And really, you pave a path for this deliberation. You have given some idea that what is expected. You have made the job of ma'am very easy, that you have bounded it with your expertise, that what is expected from the faculty and what is the expectation of the audience. So I think madam would be kind enough to cover all the aspects. With these words, I would again request madam for her words of wisdom and deliberation on the topic. Over to madam.
Thank you, sir. So I think we can begin with the session now.
Yeah, please.
Okay. So welcome to all the participants. So today, as we will be discussing on the topics of literature review, hypothesis formulation, different types of hypothesis and hypothesis testing, a bit on research design and sample design. So that is how the discussion will flow through. In between, there are some questions for you to ponder on, and maybe I'll just give 1 or 2 minutes for you to answer it for yourself. Answers will all be discussed with you, but first the questions for you to work on it, and maybe then we'll discuss the answers for it, and in that way the session will proceed. So I'll start with sharing my screen. So the time I think is till 5 o'clock. So there are many things to be discussed. Maybe I'll not be able to discuss all the slides with you in details, but I'll definitely stop at the important slides to be discussed so that you can get an overall idea of the topic. And I hope like this will be a, like every research is a brainstorming session and a journey ahead. So what we'll try to do over here is to create an awareness in you and interest in you so that you know what all is there and how to do things. And maybe with that wisdom, you can proceed ahead in your journey of research. So with that, we'll start with the session now.
Thank you, ma'am.
So I hope you can see the slides over here. So we'll start
Yes, ma'am.
with the discussion.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so we'll start with the discussion on like literature review, which is one of the very, very important part of like when we do, whenever we think of even doing a research, before we embark into doing a research, but we think that we'll be doing a research, first important topic that comes to our mind is what to do the research on. What is the industry thinking? What is the academia thinking? What are other people who are connected, who are doing research presently, they are thinking? What others who have already done research, they have thought on a particular topic that is interesting to you? Or you may even try to know like what is going on, like what do I do a research on? To find the answer to this question, like if it is there in your mind, the first thing that we need to do is to do a proper literature review. So, which is the most very basic part. It is the, like it is your building, like your whole research will stand on how good you have done your literature review, how critically you have done your literature review. It is actually the base on which your whole research stands. So when you talk of literature review, it is the most important part, and it is not only studying what others are doing or what have been done, but it is studying it in a very systematic and critical way so that you get to have a scientific knowledge of the whole process of studying the past things what have been done before you start your journey with the research. And it is not a like easy task. It cannot be done in one day, and it has a very systematic step of doing. So what we'll now see, what are the different, like why a literature review is very important for scientific research. So as I discussed with you, it is very important. Like it gives the literature review, it gives you insight into the like what you need to do. Like first is, do you need to improve an already established theory which is there? So if you want to do it, then how far the earlier theory did, what the theory studied earlier, you need to know that before you can suggest improvements on that. What are the existing knowledge in a particular domain? So then what are the like other issues which can be related to that field? What could be the thoughts which is supporting your thoughts? What are the thoughts which are there which is contrary to your thoughts? All this knowledge you need to understand. So, and what is the relationship between different kinds of thoughts? Like two events may have occurred, so you want to relate one with the other. Is there any past work who have already thought about it? If they have thought about it, how far they have progressed? What are the limitations of those studies? So it helps you to get an overall idea, warm up, and like scientific evidence of where to start from and how to start with your research. So it is very important to do literature review in a very systematic way. It helps you to identify the gaps also. So when we're talking of doing research in a very systematic way, then what we can understand, there could be different sources from where we study and how we do the literature review. So accordingly, we can tell there are three sources of literature review that we follow. One is the primary source, second, then we have the secondary source, and third is the tertiary source. So when we talk of primary literature, it is like the like the original research that and or new scientific discoveries. You are studying it from like journals, you are studying it from dissertations, somebody's thesis you are studying, so technical reports you are studying, conference proceedings that you've attended and you are studying. So all these kind of things will come under your primary literature review. Next, when you're talking of secondary literatures, these are literatures which are like, could be, you can take a summation or summary of 2 3 different papers or sources that they have done, so which we talk of like literature review articles, chapters of books. So and these are not very current, maybe 2 3 4 years back research, which have been collated by someone and put together in some one place. So these are secondary sources of literature. So when we talk of tertiary sources, these are again somewhat one degree, like older. So which are again, like talk of condensed versions of research, which talks of like which do have primary or secondary sources. They will refer to it, and which are good places to look for facts and get general overview of the subject. So these are like the textbooks. These are dictionaries, encyclopedias, and handbooks. So what you understand at the back of the textbook, we will have like the sources. So those sources, when you go back, you are actually doing the secondary literature review. And if you see that source itself is a meta-analysis, means it is a summation of different papers, original papers clubbed together, and you are going back again to study each of those seminal papers, then you are doing a primary literature review. So as per the sources, we can classify literature based on primary literature, secondary literature, and tertiary literature. So after this, what we are going to discuss now, like we may be thinking like which is the most important source, like from which we can do our literature review, because we have now discussed about 3 different kinds of sources. So we'll discuss Aiton's hierarchy over here, which tells like which are the most respected source of literatures, which is widely accepted worldwide when we're doing a research. So these are like peer-reviewed scholarly and scientific journal articles, which are from reputed publishers, peer-reviewed conference proceedings. See the word peer-reviewed is appearing in each of the sources, and its front means whatever you are submitting, so it gets like authenticated, validated. You get your feedback from the editors, then section editors, co-editors, peer reviewers, and they give you a feedback on how to improve your work. And after a lot of feedback and correspondence with the author, they writing back and then getting suggestions, then only these papers get accepted after a lot of critical review. So these are most genuine sources or sought after sources for doing your literature review. Then books from like highly credible publishing houses, then official documents of government or public agencies. So from highly credible non-government organizations. These are the primary sources which are most respected as a source of literature. Second to that, when suppose you're working on a topic which is very new, may not have reached that level where you get to see articles from these respected sources. So then what is the next step that you can go to is like which you can use in moderation is like credible edited professional journals, edited conference proceedings, white papers from well-respected think tanks or research institutes. But you see, again, the word edited is written in front of whether you are talking of a professional journal or you are talking of a conference proceeding, because it tells like it is not only what you are thinking, but whatever you are thinking, writing, trying to convey to a larger set of people has been thoroughly checked and vetted by experts in the domain. Something which can be used sparingly is from sources from highly reputable news channels or credible websites. And what should be avoided are non-scholarly sources like Wikipedia, quotations, websites, so items from some predatory journals, less reputable news sources or websites. So these kind of sources needs to be like avoided whenever we are talking of mm, from where to do a literature review or what kind of literature review has its credibility. Next, we'll try to discuss on, like what is like a good literature review and what we need to remember when we are doing a literature review. So first thing, which is be very specific and succinct, means like we need to understand when you are reporting for literature, in writing a literature review is both a science and an art. So in that case, when you're writing a literature review and we're talking of just a critical write-up of whatever you have seen earlier, so you need to be very specific and succinct about you have read something from which article, what are the specific methodologies used, what are the other important points to be noted, and it is not something that you are writing which in a very flowery language or you are doing very in-depth analysis of each of the point. It needs to be, the researcher needs to be selective, because and writing there, concise writing there is also an important art, because within a short space given, time given, you have to be uh, representing your literature very well. So which are the important points and why they're important, what could be the contrary findings, and what are the points that the limitations of the study. So these needs to be mentioned so that you can start your journey from there ahead. And there should be a focus on the current topics which are happening. So actually the literature review never stops after you have found your topic of doing research, but literature review is generally on throughout your period of research, so that you get to understand how your field in which you're doing the research is progressing, what other people are adding to it, and you need to be updated about your literature review. So, and again, you need to find like whenever you are doing a literature review, why it is told like you need to do it from a good source. Because whenever we're talking for a good source, then in those papers only get accepted in good research journals, which are very strong in their research methodology which comprises of what is the method that have been followed, what is the statistical analysis that they have done, how they have collected data, what is the number of sample who have responded, whether the result can be generalized or not. So they're very strong in reporting those things, which gives a strong base to your research also while you are referring to those papers. So it is very important that you ensure evidence for the claims like the people are making in their papers, and you focus on the sources of evidences. Now, when we talk of focus on the sources of, it is very important that you take account of contrary evidence also, because sometimes the research field may be, very fuzzy in nature, and you may be having some literature which are supporting the concepts, and some literature which may not be supporting the concept, or which are like providing, like different set of evidences to make their own points, to put their own points, so that you are getting contrary evidence. So as a researcher, we should start our research with an unbiased mind, so that we get to see both the points for and against the topic that we are trying to do our research on. And then through our research, we may try to prove like which side we are like trying to express our findings, or can both things happen. Like there are certain aspects which are positive, and there are certain aspects which may work against the maybe the relationship or the topic that you're working on. So taking account of contrary evidence is very important. Again, reference citation is very important. It is a part of research ethics also, the way that you're writing your reference section, bibliography, because it is very, very important that we acknowledge the work of the earlier authors, earlier researchers who have worked on the topic before you, because they have already created a base from where you are starting your research. So while we are doing our research, it is very important that we give citations, acknowledge to the papers, the authors of the papers that we are referring to. And again, there is a very scientific way of writing the bibliography also. Avoiding abbreviations should be avoided, because sometimes people do not understand jargons or abbreviations, so it needs to be avoided. And the literature review should be written in a very, like simple format, with like no flowery English, or very, like critical kind of English, which people may not understand, but some like smooth flow kind of language, so that if even a novice person is reading whatever you have written, following the way that you have written, they can form an idea about the concept that you are going to talk of, and they can also get a guidance on how to do a literature review properly. So next is like we will discuss with you some of the steps of doing a literature review. So first step is, of course, like what is your preparation? In the sense, what is your topic? What are the sources do you have? Like how will you keep track of your research? Then when you talk of retrieval, it is a brainstorming of the search terms. So when you're doing it, like this is a kind of smart searching also, how you use filters to narrow the searches, keep a record of searches you've already made. So then you have to appraise the articles, like do they look relevant, say do they meet your criteria, then what are the points that they have studied. And then it is a stage when you're doing the synthesis, means you are reading and taking notes, you are like reading through the articles, and you're trying to see whether any themes are emerging in that particular paper. Have they cited any other article which could be important and relevant, and you go back and you study that articles also. Then comes the write up, means can you group articles based on a theme? What is the essence coming out of the literature review about the current state of the concept that you're working on? So those are very important. So then what happens, you can do sharing of your literature review, because that is also your critical analysis of the concept till now. And then you can share your literature review itself to different journals to understand with your understanding of the gap in the research field and how you want to like fill up that gap with your research. These kind of things also you can share with in journals for getting feedback and getting to disseminate the knowledge that you may have structured from a very unstructured field of knowledge being spread here and there about a particular topic, but maybe something was not collated and critically analyzed for a particular field. So next is, of course, is important, as we tell, like it is a documentation is very important so that you're like, and only by sharing through a particular journal and getting a review, it is a very iterative process through which your knowledge gets like, like stored for future, where you can refer to and others in future can refer to your work and you get your citation for that. So doing a research, we have different processes of doing the research, different methods of doing the research. So what we talk of a systematic literature review, which is an SLR process. So it has a very systematic step of planning, selection, extraction, and execution. So what you can see is when we're talking of the planning stage, which is the purpose, like you get to understand for what purpose are we doing the research? Are we doing it for exploring what have been studied earlier? Are we doing it for studying what has not been studied earlier? So is it going to give me a theoretical base? Are we going to do it for hypothesis testing? So what is the purpose of doing the literature review? That needs to be cleared. Then how do we go for it? What are the protocols? Like research ethics is also a very important part over here. Like what are the methods that we follow? How do we train ourselves to do a proper literature review? And then when we talk of selection, then searching for literature, practical screening, these are very important things. And then after you do that screening, what is the data or information that you extract from it? What is the quality appraisal? How do you appraise about the quality of the papers that you have, like reviewed through in your literature review? What are the gaps in the methodology? Was their methodology proper, or they have missed out on certain points? So these are the ways that you critically analyze a particular study. After you do that, what you do is synthesize the study and you write your review. Review is not just only reporting what has happened earlier, but it is a critical review where you are putting your own mind and thoughts into how in past the particular concept has been studied, what was the methodology followed, how far the methodology was strong, what was the gaps in the methodology possibly leading to what kind of conceptual errors, and like how through your research you can try to find an answer to those gaps which are there existing in the knowledge domain. So these are the different steps, as you can see, very systematic steps which we follow, like which paper to keep and how to exclude papers based on like certain criteria that we set for selecting those as a part of literature review. You may have thousands and thousands of papers on a particular topic, but all may not be relevant for the issue at hand about the particular concept that you aim to highlight about. So every research may not be relevant for you. So what you can do, as you see, like in the steps given, which is very elaborately written over here, you can see like you identify papers from the web, then you screen papers based on certain criteria, then again you are able to retrieve some of the papers from different sources. And then where you talk of eligibility of the papers based on like different criteria, based on, as I told you, like what are the good sources of the paper, those becomes the primary selection criteria for their eligibility. Maybe you funnel down into a group of papers which have met your expectations to be selected in the literature review that you are going to report through. So it is not only gathering papers from different sources, but it is how you are screening the papers and narrowing down for the papers which are relevant to you based on different criteria, search criteria that you are setting for it, and also the eligibility criteria for selection. That will help you to narrow down to the papers which are most relevant, authentic, quality wise sound to be reported as a part of your like literature review. So next we will move on. After this literature review is done, it gives us a very systematic idea of where the concepts stands now with respect to previous works done, the methodology followed, the gaps in the literature, gaps in the methodology, and maybe the confusion, conceptual confusions in the field, relations which have been studied, relations which have not been studied. So based on these facts, what we can do next, how it helps us to suggest the hypothesis for our own study. Means it helps us to make some conjectural statements or like the statements which we keep in front so that it becomes the guiding statement for us doing our research, and we do our research to either prove the statement to be right or reject it to be wrong. So in the next section of discussion now, I'll be proceeding to discuss the hypothesis formulation, the base of which lies with you are able to suggest your hypothesis in a better way if you have done your literature review well, because the better you do your literature review, it helps you to make your define your scope of study. It helps you to define your problem well. And if you are able to define your scope of study, and if you're able to know your problem well, the next step, obviously, which follows is you are able to state your hypothesis well also, because you know what are the relationships you are going to study or how you are going to study it. So in this section of discussion now, we are going to discuss on hypothesis. So as you can see, the word hypothesis consists of two words, hypo and thesis. So whenever we are talking of hypothesis, the word hypo means a tentative statement or which is subject to verification. And thesis means the statement about the solution of the problem. So in a word, hypothesis is a tentative statement about the solution of the problem. It provides a solution of the problem that is to be verified empirically and based on some rationale. Where do you get the rationale from? Is your conceptual framework that you have done. We have already discussed this extensively in our past session that we have had with you, like how to develop a research framework, how to do a research design, and so that is very important. And also from past literature review, you develop this rationale. Here we have a different way of understanding hypothesis, which is a composition of two or more variables which are to be verified. And like when we're talking of thesis, it is the position of these variables in the specific frame of reference. So which will come as the independent variable, which will be your dependent variable, which variable will be mediator, which variable will be moderator. These are again part of your conceptual framework. You can refer to the earlier discussions on research methodology that you've had in this platform. So which talks of, like when you're talking of a hypothesis, we are speaking of the positioning of these variables in our conceptual framework and how they are related to each other to explain the whole phenomena that we are going to study. So what are the functions, if we just try to summarize, like what are the functions of hypothesis? So it guides the direction of the study. So it also limits like what we shall study and what we shall not study as a part of this research. It helps to operationally define our, like the problem statement, and then it suggests which form of research design is to be appropriate. Again, literature review gives you a lot of feedback on this, and it talks of the providing a framework and organizing the conclusion to that result. So an example you can see, like when we talk of husbands and wives agree in their perception of their respective roles in purchasing decisions. So when we talk of husbands and wives, these are the people who should be studied. They are the sample of our study. What we need to study, like whether they agree in their perception of their respective roles for what is for certain purchasing decisions that we are talking of. So you can like formulate a hypothesis around this, like when we're talking of what is the relationship between the perception of husband and wives respective roles in purchasing decision. You can ask also the problem statement, the research question could be, is there any difference or perception of the respective roles of husband and wife in purchasing decisions? And accordingly, you can formulate your hypothesis as conjectural statements, because you cannot do a study to find an answer to a question. Rather, what happens, you start with a like designed answer, like you can start with, no, there is no relationship between husbands and wife, or no difference between husbands and wives perception in purchasing decision. And you do that research either to prove like there is no difference, or to prove yes, there is a difference. Because you cannot prove a question, we can always try to work to prove a statement, which is a positive statement, or we find an answer to a negative statement, like something is there or something is not there. Accordingly, what we see, like we have two different kind of hypotheses, which we are going to discuss now. So before that, we'll just try to tell you again what are the different, or what are the like ways that when you talk of hypothesis, the nature of hypothesis. So it is a conceptual in nature. So something conceptual. It is a verbal statement in a declarative form. It declares about certain occurrences. As I told you, like there is no difference between husbands and wives' perception like in purchase decision, or you can declare like there is a lot of difference between husbands and wives' purchase decision. You can also tell husband's purchase decision is better than wife's purchase decision, or wife's purchase decision is better than the husband's purchase decision. So either you can make a total statement, or you can make one-sided directional statement also. So point 3 is what we see over here. It represents the tentative relationship between two or more variables, and it it is a future or forward oriented because you have now stated something and you will be doing your study to prove whatever you have stated, find evidence for whatever you have stated. So you do not do study and then formulate the hypothesis. Rather, you formulate the hypothesis and then do the study. That's why it is told to be future oriented or forward oriented. And it is a pivot of any scientific research because all scientific activities, all research activities are designed towards verification of certain hypotheses. So we'll move next to the discussion on the what are the steps in formulation of the hypothesis. First is it is to understand the area of the problem that we have already told, like because hypothesis is framed, formulated based on your literature review, your conceptualization of the work that you're doing. It helps to consider a goal, like what you are going to study. Like in the example that we gave, here you are going to study the purchase decision of a couple, which is husband and wife, and you want to study whether they are similar or different as respect to their perception of things when it comes to purchase decision. You may also want to study who is better than the other one in taking some purchase decisions. So there are certain goals that you want to study through your hypothesis. It helps to identify the variables also, like what variables, what must be there. So, okay, whether they are testable or not, and specify like what are the dependent and independent variables and other variables, as I told you, which could be moderating variable, mediating variable in the study. And what are the perceived relationships between them, like the variables. Like, does the existence of one variable influences the existence of the other variable or not? So, what are the influence of each variable on each other? And then you need to think critically about the hypothesis and like whether whatever you are proposing, whether they are testable, whether they're verifiable, and what are the processes you can do to confirm your variable. Like if you're taking to study the example that we gave through for this, like purchasing decision. So how do you study? Do you just float a form for people to fill up? Then questions you may not be able to answer, like whether they are jointly the people that they're responding to are really husband and wife or not. How do you understand what is the effect of a couple coming together and influencing each other for a purchase decision? Or it would be a better option for you to go to a shopping mall, maybe an outlet, to find out, observe for yourself when couples are coming in and they're trying to buy something and they're discussing on it, then how the purchase decisions get influenced by the type of discussions the couple are having with each other. So the problem that you are going to study, the hypothesis that you are going to formulate will give you a hint towards what is the methodology that you need to follow so that you can find a proper answer to the research question or the hypothesis that you are formulating to study the research question. And then you need to express the idea as your own hypothesis. As I told you, like there is no influence of like the husband and wife's purchase decision on their perception of the product, on the purchase decision. Whatever the problem that you want to study, you can break it down into some logical conjectural statement where which you would work towards proving it or disproving that statement. So that is expressing the idea in your own terms. So there are different sources of hypothesis, like where do you get your sources of hypothesis from? Like it could be similar things happening together. You can hypothesize facts based on your past studies, which is again the literature review, the day-to-day practices, the research in the field till then starting from functional executives. You can take suggestions from shop floors, scientific theories. Sources of hypothesis could be many from any sources that you want to study. And then you need to make a statement in your own word to the way that you understand the problem and the relationship that you want to study. That will define how you state your hypothesis. Now, there are very important steps to how you like if you, the when you move forward to state the hypothesis, it is very important that you know how to write a hypothesis. There are like certain thumb rules, certain expectations when you write the hypothesis, so that it can be easily understood by the researcher and it becomes easily testable. So writing a proper hypothesis is again a scientific process, and again it is an art. So here we are going to discuss some of the points of writing a hypothesis in a very good way. So it should be clear and precise hypothesis, like for reliable inferences, like 2 or 3 concepts should not be jumbled up in one hypothesis. You like if it is a complex concept that you need to study as a part of your research problem, it is customary that you break it down into hypotheses. And even if that hypothesis is also a complex one, you can very well break it down into sub hypotheses, so that the statement that you are like trying to prove through your research, each of the statement is a very uh, a simple statement, and that you can study, and step by step you can study the whole concept. So what we can summarize, like, is a clear and precise hypothesis is very important for reliable inferences. It should be testable to avoid research stagnation, because if whatever you state as hypothesis, before stating it, you need to understand whether do you have the means for studying it and proving it. So suppose you are stating like maybe there is life in Mars. The life exists in Mars. So do you have the provision of going, you given your framework that you are here, and you are maybe not connected to any of the space centers, is it feasible for you to study this? Do you have enough network whom you can contact, and you can send your people who will study this and come back for you? So these are certain things that you need to understand, like whether whatever you do that you can test it or not. These were again fall under the concept of parsimony of doing a particular research. So when we talk of a testable hypothesis, it allows for deductions that can be confirmed or disproved through observation. So if you tell there is life after death, how do you test it? So these kind of things you need to be very careful out. Maybe you're a very ambitious researcher, but you need to understand also how do I study whatever I am stating that I'm going to study. So that is where we talk of a testable hypothesis. When we talk of relational hypothesis, it should test the relationship, or it should state the relationship between variables. So B occurs because of A, or A has a direct impact on B. So these kind of relations, we talk of the relational hypothesis. And every hypothesis should be very specific and limited in scope. and making them more testable. As I told you, if there is a big concept, break it down into smaller statements, which are testable, simple statements. Simplicity is one of the quality of good hypothesis. So, any hypothesis should align with the established facts which are there, and you can cross-check it through experts also, and it should be reasonable, testable within a reasonable time frame. So that is very important when you're talking of hypothesis testing. It should be testable within a reasonable time frame, and it should explain the original problem condition that you, because you want to study a problem, that question mark, you are hypothesis is a answer that you frame for the question which is there in your mind, and you do your research to prove, to find the answer that you have thought of is correct or not. So it must explain the original problem condition and must have empirical reference to it. So the methodology also, because the way that you write your problem tells your hypothesis and the future research methodology that you are going to follow. So now we are going to, as I told you, like you write a statement either to prove it or to disprove it. And there are two different kinds of hypotheses that you work on. One is called the H0, which is the null hypothesis, and HA, which is the alternate hypothesis. So when we talk of H0, the null hypothesis, it talks of like everything is perfect, maybe there is no relationship, and no relationship exists between two variables, and even if there are certain facts that you're going to study, it is not because there is a certain relationship between the two variables that you're going to study, but because maybe some like errors which have happened, or by chance factors that has happened. So, and it always talks of an equality sign. So, but the alternate hypothesis assumes like there is a positive relationship between two things happening, and so that is exactly what we like want to study. So, what happens? We generally formulate a null hypothesis to like to reject it, and a hypothesis, alternate hypothesis is formulated to accept it. But we always start with the null hypothesis, because rejecting something for something is not happening in the way it is stated, like equality does not always happen, is easy to do, more scientific to do, rather than proving something is happening as stated in, or there is some relationship between A and B as stated in alternate hypothesis, because there could be some relationship happening between a variable A and variable B, but the reason that you are justifying for it could be different. So it is always safe to formulate a null hypothesis and reject it, so that it, on the other side, proves like whatever statement you are making, relational statement that you are making about the relationship between two variables, gets proves otherwise. But it is a bit risky to start working with an alternate hypothesis, because you do not know maybe the true facts for a relationship happening between two variables. Suppose if you start with a hypothesis like there is no relationship between like consuming ice cream and having maybe flu, that is easy to disprove, and when you disprove, your facts gets proved, like maybe consuming ice cream and having flu are related. But if you start with the hypothesis, taking ice cream is related to having flu, it is very difficult to prove the actual reason for it, because there could be a third variable which may link these two variables, which is a silent variable, which you may not have studied now, but may affect the relationship that you are telling. So it may be not just the consuming ice cream and then having a flu, but it may be related to the number of ice creams that you take, the season that you take, the time of the day that you take. So all these factors may be related to the consumption of ice cream and you having flu. So it is better to start with the assumption there is no relationship between consumption of ice cream and you catching flu, and then you disprove it. And when you disprove it, you reject it, automatically what gets accepted is there is a relationship between consumption of ice cream and you having flu for whatever reason. So here is a set of, again, we'll just take a 1 minute break for you to work on the two questions that are given to you about formulating the null and alternate hypothesis about the two problem statements that is given over here. We read the statement as Raju restaurant near the railway station at Falna have been having average sales of 500 teacups per day. Because of the development of bus stands nearby, it expects to increase its sales. During the first 12 days after the start of the bus stand, the daily sales were as under 550, 570, 490, 615, 505, 580, 570, 460, 600, 580, 530, 526. So on the basis of this sample of information, so can one conclude that Raju restaurant sales have increased? So this is the question that has been asked to you, and you have to formulate the null and alternate hypothesis for this. The second problem statement, what is given is the specimen of copper wares drawn from a large lot have the following breaking strengths in weight, kg weight, which is 578, 572, 570, 568, 572, 578, 570, 572, 596, and 544. So you have to test whether the mean breaking strength of the lot may be taken to be 578 kg weight or not. Again, you formulate the null and alternative hypothesis for it. So we'll just give you 1 minute time to work on it before we show you the answer. So what we can take to be the, like, I hope you have started working on the two problems. So what we'll do here is we'll start with the null hypothesis that the average sale is 500 teacups per day, and they have not increased unless proved. So which is the null hypothesis is mean teacups per day, mean sale is 500 cups per day. And we'll write the alternate hypothesis as mean sales is more than 500 cups, as we want to conclude that the sales have increased. In case of problem 2, like we will start with the hypothesis, like the null hypothesis is equal to the 578 kg, which is the mean, which is equal to the hypothesized mean. An alternate hypothesis, which is the mean is not equal to the 578 kg, it could be greater than or lesser than it. So these are the alternate hypotheses. So you can see, like when you're talking of the like null hypothesis, we are starting with an is equal to sign, and we start with the question, maybe the expectations given. And when we talk of the alternate hypothesis, we try to frame it in the way the question is given, whether the mean sales is greater than 500 cup and the mean kg weight is like more or less than 578 kg. So that formulates our alternate hypothesis. So we'll move forward with the discussion now. So we come here for talking of the, we have like, if you can remember, like it was while the setting the stage for the discussion, it was told like the testing of hypothesis is also very important, because it is not only enough that you formulate a hypothesis, you formulate a hypothesis to test it. So the next set of discussion that we'll be having is on testing of hypothesis. So first is what we talk of, like we have to state both the H0 means the null hypothesis as well as the alternate hypothesis. Then we have to specify the significance or the p-value of the level of significance beyond which your hypothesis becomes acceptable or rejected. We reject it. So then we have to decide on the correct sampling distribution. And then we have to sample a random sample and work out an appropriate value from the sample data. So then we are going to calculate the probability that the sample would be diverging from the expectations if we hold the null hypothesis to be true. Then what happens? We need to study whether the probability is equal to or smaller than the value which is stated for A0 as in a case of one tail test, or the value by 2 in case of two tail test. What we find is if the probability is lesser than, then what the as stated in the null hypothesis, we accept it. We accept the alternate hypothesis and we reject the null hypothesis. But if the probability of the how far the sample is away, diverted from the mean originally given stated value, the probability of that is higher than whatever is stated, then what we do, we accept the null hypothesis and we reject the alternate hypothesis. So if I repeat, if the probability is equal to or smaller than the value in case of given value, stated table value in case of one tail test, and the table value by 2 in cases of two tail test, we reject the null hypothesis and we accept the alternate hypothesis. But if the probability is more than the stated table value, then what we do, we reject the alternate hypothesis and take the null hypothesis to be true. But when we do this, we run through the risk of doing some error, which we take to be the type 1 error and type 2 error of hypothesis testing. And it is always a decision of risks. It is a decision of your risk taking ability, risk tolerance, or the nature of the problem that you are working on. Should you take what kind of risk and where do you minimize the error? These are decisional problems to be thought of, and it may vary from like the precision level that you want from situation to situation. And because if you want to control one type of error, you may run into the risk of committing the other type of error. So we will explain these two errors over here now, because now in this part of the discussion, we will be highlighting you through different, we'll take you through a journey of different related concepts which are very important and associated with hypothesis. And we will try to like focus on the different aspects of it. But later on, when you start doing your own research, it is always recommended, it is always justified that you do in-depth study, because each one of them requires in-depth study for understanding, mastering these facts, and then you stating your own hypothesis. So we'll discuss type 1 and type 2 error over here now. So if the null hypothesis is originally true, but you reject it, what you run the risk of is doing type 1 error, which we tell to be the false positive. But if the null hypothesis is originally false, and if you are not rejecting it, what you are doing is the type 2 error or false negative, the probability of which is beta. So I repeat, the null hypothesis is true. Like there is no relationship between you consuming ice cream and you having flu, but you have rejected it. Then you have done a type 1 error. But suppose the null hypothesis is false, truly, maybe there is some medical evidences which proves like there is, like lot of relationship between you consuming ice cream and, like you catching some very like intense kind of flu. But maybe either you have overlooked that literature or you have not taken very care in controlling the variables that you need to study. So what you may conclude, like where there is like no relationship between ice cream and you taking ice cream and you having flu, though they may have some kind of or a very, very great kind of relationship, and it may be a proven fact, but somehow you have not considered it. So then the null hypothesis is false, but you have failed to reject it, or you have not rejected it. So then you do an error which is still told to be the type 2 error, which is a false negative. Like null hypothesis is false, but you have not rejected it. So these are, again, I've just given you an example of maybe not so risky kind of decision, maybe restricted only to ice cream and you having flu. But these are sometimes whether you go for type 1 error or type 2 error, sometimes maybe very crucial decisions in kind of life-saving decisions, in kinds of like you giving injection to a patient and whether that will save the life. Maybe that is a new drug and you are testing it for a first time. You operating on the patient and saving the person, but again the health conditions of the patient, whether that person is going to survive or not. So these kind of dilemma kind of situations, ethical kind of situations, when sometimes you get stuck into this, we refer to about type 1 and type 2 decisions. And you have to make a pragmatic choice of which type of decision you will take based on the risks involved. and maybe the decision for what you are trying to take this, like the decision element for what you are deciding and the outcome of it. So again, bit of questions for you to just find out again a type 1 and type 2 error. So a group of culinary arts students is comparing two methods for preparing asparagus, traditional steaming and a new frying method. They want to know if patrons of their school restaurant prefer the new frying method over the traditional steaming method. A sample of patrons are given asparagus prepared using each method and asked to select their preference. A statistical analysis is performed to determine if more than 50% of the participants prefer the new frying method. So, as we told, like the H0 or the null hypothesis is P is equal to 0.5, and alternate hypothesis is P is greater than 0.5. So there are two questions related to it. If they reject the null hypothesis and conclude that their new frying method is preferred, when in reality it is not, then what type of error it would be? And second question is, if they fail to reject the null hypothesis and conclude that the new method is not superior when in reality it is, what type of error it would be? We'll just give you a few seconds to ponder it because I've already explained it to you, but you can work on it for yourself. Maybe a quick question on this to you so that you can cross-check whether you have understood the concepts correctly.
Ma'am, we are waiting for the response.
Yeah?
Ma'am, we are waiting for the response.
Okay, okay. So will you tell me when the response is there?
Yes, ma'am, I will tell you.
Okay, okay.
Ma'am, can you just repeat the question once more for our audience?
Yeah. Can you show them the slide? I think it's written in the slide. If you can focus on the slide, they can see it.
Okay, so ma'am is particularly asking for the question, that is question number mentioned on the first and second point. So if anybody has the answer, please reply in the chat box. Ma'am, we have received a response from Delhi.
Okay.
Anurani has responded. She is saying for the first question, first is type 1 error.
Okay. And first time, this the second one.
For second one, she haven't responded yet.
Okay, so you just tell us like when we should tell the answer.
Okay, ma'am. For second also we have received. Second answer is type 2 error.
Okay, so let us see how far they're correct. Okay. So I think they're correct. We should clap for them who have responded correctly. Okay. So it is, of course, the type 1 error if they reject the null hypothesis and they conclude that their new frying method is preferred, when reality it's maybe not, because it could be a sampling error also. That is very important. Maybe they have called people who loved fried foods and maybe frying methods, and so which gives them a belief, like, which could be a false belief, incorrect belief, like the new method is better than the uh, old traditional method, because the sample that they have taken for uh, giving the judgment, they're biased towards fried foods. So that may lead to type 1 error. So, and then type 2 error, like if they fail to reject the null hypothesis and conclude that the new method is not superior when in reality it is. So they will get an incorrect belief that the new method is not superior, and maybe they will stop trying for new things and experiment on it, or different kinds of, or they get demotivated, or different kinds of things may happen. So what we can understand over here, like because of type 1 error, as you see, it depends a lot on the sample that you have selected. So sampling selection, controlling of errors, these becomes very important before you embark into the testing of hypothesis. So congratulations to those who have responded, and they have responded correctly as reported. So question 1 is for type 1 error, and question 2 is type 2 error. We move forward with the discussion now, and we talk of like the different tests of hypothesis. So there are various tests of hypothesis, which are the different methods whenever you're talking of parametric tests, non-parametric tests, the sample size that we have. So I've just listed it down over here because time, due to the positive time, it doesn't really permit us to go on for elaborate discussion and working out on the methodology of the different kinds of test hypothesis testing that we have. So one is, of course, is a Z test, which is you can have one sample Z test, two sample, then two proportions Z test. When you have a big sample and population is known, you can go for T test when it is one sample T test, again two sample T test, paired T test. There are different subdivisions, and for which the minimum sample size should be 30. Then we have test of frequency, which we call to be the chi-square test, which is chi-square fit test, chi-square test of independence, like whether two concepts are independent from each other. Like those who have black eyeballs, do they have black hair always? Or you can tell, like, eye color and hair color are not related to each other, they are independent of each other. So when you're talking of these kind of decisions, we use chi-square test of independence. Then we have F test, where we have one-way ANOVA, post hoc test, factorial analysis of variance, repeated measures of variance, analysis of covariance. So this is actually a very long list. So we have just summarized here a few for you getting the awareness on different kinds of tests which are available, through which you can test your hypothesis But again, there are different assumptions for it, like whether it is a parametric test, non-parametric test, what are the assumptions, how much you know about the population, what is your sample size, how much in what are your sample characteristics, so many different things that we need to understand, like before we go for or to what level you want to do the generalization of the findings that you're having, to what extent you can generalize it. These are the different queries you should be having in your mind before we select your sample, because the way that you select your sample will definitely have an impact on what kind of hypothesis testing you are able to do. But this is again a very huge set of discussion, which is like it is really not possible to cover everything within this capsule like time that you're having. But again, I've just sensitized you to the different topics, and it is essential, like before you go for embarking into your research, testing, and hypothesis, you study the assumptions very carefully. The some of which I mentioned, the what is the nature of your sample, what is the nature of your population, do you know everything of your population or not, what is the generalizability that you are aiming for. Again, what is the kind of relationships that you're going to find out. So what is your sample size? Do you want to study the, you know, um, like A cross B kind of effect? What is the interrelationship between two variables in affecting a third variable? Everything will have an impact on your, like the testing that you do. And the kind of testing that you'll be able to do depends on the sample that you have selected and the research design that you have adopted for the study. Everything is interlinked to each other. Like literature review have an impact on hypothesis. Hypothesis will have an impact on your research design. The type of research design and sample selection that you have done will have an impact on the testing of the hypothesis. So for each of the step of the research methodology, you always have to do a forward and backward thinking before, and you have to visualize the whole path from start to end that we have already discussed in an earlier lecture with a like a conceptual map with a flow diagram. Like you have to visualize and plan for, that is a part of your research planning also, end to end from the start till the end before you start your research. What kind of research, what kind of literature, where do I look for my sample, what kind of questions do I ask, how do I design, what will be my hypothesis if I have to test my hypothesis, what kind of statistics do I use, if I use this kind of statistics, what are the control measures that I need to take, and what kind of results do I get, how do I interpret it, everything, what is the implication of my study. End-to-end planning needs to be done quite beforehand, before you, and then you need to start your like final research. And that's where, you know, doing a pilot study becomes very important to give you a sense of whether your thought process is on the correct line or not. So next we are going to discuss on the next part, which is that of research methodology, research design. So as I told you, for testing your hypothesis, a very important and related concept is that of research design. So, which is like some questions which will be answered through your design is like, what is the study about? Like why this study is being made? So where do I carry out the study? What type of data is required? Because if you're going to test a hypothesis, you need to understand what kind of data you require, how much data you require. So where do you find the data? Then through what period of time do I collect the data? What will be my sample size? What will be my data collection methods? How will I analyze the data? then in what style the report will be prepared. So as I told you, end to end, from start to end, everything needs to be pre-planned, questions answered before, like at least regarding your planning needs to be very strong before you just start your research work. So every research design do have something which we talk of must-haves of research design. So it must have a clear statement of the research problem. So if you do not know what exactly you are doing your research on, you cannot proceed. So it must have a clear statement of the research problem. Second, it must have the clear idea or clear write-up about the procedures and techniques to be used for gathering information, means a part of your literature review and the way that you collect your data. Each must have a clear idea about the population to be studied, means you are collecting your data from whom. And when you talk of population, related concept is that of sample. Because as a part of a research, you may not be able to study the whole population at one go. What you generally study is a representative of that population whom we refer to as sample. So if you understand what is the population to be studied, and then you understand which is a representative sample of that population, how do I collect data from that sample? So that is again a discussion on sample design. And then another must have is like the methods to be used in like you're collecting data. So in a nutshell, we can tell like this is the whole gamut of different types of research design that we have. Like we have exploratory design, we have descriptive design, and we have experimental design. So when we talk of exploratory design, it is through survey concerning literatures, experience survey, and insight stimulation studies, could be through qualitative researches also. Descriptive researches are more or less qualitative researches where you describe certain phenomena which is happening naturally in environment or in your surrounding, and it gives a lot of information, new information on which future researches can be based. So studies in the field of history, geography, these are more or less like descriptive researches which later on may give rise to exploratory design studies also. When we talk of experimental research, it can be like formal or informal both. So when we talk of informal experimental design, so it is like before and after study without any control design. When we talk of a control, it is on the group, a group which is taken, which is similar to the experimental group, but on which the experimental intervention has not been done. So that is taken to be the control group. And we study the behavior in the control group and compare it with the experimental group to understand the effect or the implication of the experimental variable that we have tried to like select or manipulate, and then we find what is the effect. So informal experimental design could be like before and after without control design. It can be after only with control design, before and after with control design. So when we talk of formal experimental designs, it can be in the lab setup, generally in the lab setup, which is completely randomized design, so that you can nullify all effects of intervening variables. It can be randomized block design, or it can be in the field also, like whenever we are talking of Latin square design, factorial design, all these, it is experimental design, it is generally in the lab setup, it can be in the field setup also. But what we find, randomization technique is very important for nullifying the effects of the like intervening variables and control the effect of other extraneous variables, so that what becomes more prominent is the effect of independent variable with the dependent variable. And this principle is called the max mean control principle of research. We try to maximize the relationship that we want to study. We try to minimize the effect of other variables which we talk to be disturbing variables or intervening variables, and we try to control variables which are not a part of study now but may have an effect on the relationship between independent variable and dependent variable. This is the principle of research design, what we call max mean con principle of research design. Now we will talk here about some of the like features of a good research design, which is like uh, the means of obtaining information, like where from you are collecting data, how you are collecting data, what is the nature of your questionnaire. So what is the availability and skill sets of the, like there comes the, what becomes more relevant is the competency of the researcher, the acumen of the researcher in understanding facts, and the skills that the researcher is and his or her staff member is having in understanding the responses, collecting data, ice breaking through, like when you start with an interview, it's very important for the ice breaking to happen so that your respondents are comfortable, are at ease to share information with you. So that is a very important phase of like building up the rapport, ice breaking. And this requires a lot of expertise, acumen, competency on the part of the researcher to do it. And definitely it develops with practice. So then what are the objectives of the problems to be studied, the nature of the problem that needs to be studied, and the availability of time and the money that you have for doing the research work. Because if it is like you are getting a scholarship, because we were hearing like there are different kinds of scholarship for doing your research, but at the even scholarships they give you certain aims, like before you are eligible for the next scholarship, like increasing of your stipend, there are certain achievable targets given to you, which you need to achieve if you have to move from the junior scholarship level to the senior scholarship level. So, or even the year 1 to year 2 of your senior scholarship level, like we talk of extension of your scholarships or enhancement of your scholarships. So everything is very time specific and time oriented and target oriented. So these needs to be like inbuilt, incorporated in your research design. So you know like what is the investment in time, money you can make so that you complete a research properly. So as we told you, like there are different kinds of research design. So different types of study, like exploratory or formulative study, which could be like when you talk of the overall design, which is exploratory in nature, there needs to be certain kind of flexibility so that it gives you an opportunity for exploring for different aspects of the problem. Generally, it is a kind of action research, participatory research, when you are embedded in the field and you are studying facts. So that is flexible design. But when it is a descriptive or diagnostic design, so It is more of a kind of a rigid design so that you are not biased by your own thoughts, processes, and it must be exact reporting of exact observations of facts and exact reporting. So you need to be trained of like how to reduce or not to be influenced by your own personal biases while you're going to the field for collecting data, and just or being judgmental about whatever you are observing, and like report facts as you're observing. So that is very essential for a descriptive or diagnostic research. So whenever we're talking of sampling design, in exploratory it is non-probability sampling design, and in descriptive it is probability sampling design. Statistical design, when we talk of exploratory, because generally when you're going to the field, you're going for a qualitative study. So maybe it's your research design progresses with the like your experience. So you can talk of tell this to be your experience sampling also. So there is no pre-planned design for analysis, but when it is descriptive, there is a pre-planned design for analysis. So because it is an experiential sampling, so and it is observation as presented, as it develops, as it grows in field, and as you get to like develop on your earlier findings, you decide what will be your steps next day. So that observational design for exploratory or formulative research is unstructured instruments for collection of data, but for descriptive or diagnostic, it is structured or well thought out instruments for collection of data. And for operational design, so there is no fixed decisions about the operational procedures. But again, when it is a descriptive study, it is your like operational procedures are well defined. So, but here you should not be confused about the fact, like maybe I'm telling you one side you need to pre-plan everything, and when I'm telling you what is there in the exploratory or formulative research, it is no fixed decisions about the operational process. That you will be not having any fixed decision about any operational processes, procedures, and you will follow the facts as they are going to like get revealed one by one in the field. That itself is a decision that you need to take earlier at the start itself before you start your research journey. Like I will go for an exploratory study, maybe I will have nothing fixed. I will explore the field, and as and when facts reveal, at whichever side they take me to, I go on exploring that field so that I get to know more about it. I will be more flexible on the design. I will go for purposive sampling. I will not have anything pre-planned. That itself is a decision. That itself is a conscious decision and planning that you need to do before you start your research journey. So,
Ma'am, sorry to interrupt you.
yeah.
Yeah, ma'am, we have
Yeah.
received a question on this research design. What was the research design type in the example of sales of P?
In the
Example you have given of the sales of P. So the person is asking what was the research design type in that example.
sales of tea,
Yes.
this one. This question, Raju Restaurant and all. This question, please ask.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, this question.
And this is exploratory because he cannot control how many buses are coming and how many visitors will be there. There are certain facts which are beyond his own control.
Okay, ma'am. So we can proceed further because the participant would have got his answer.
Yeah. See, whatever is written on the right, you can focus on this slide also. When we talk of randomized group design, experimental design, in all these things, a researcher has a great control on how he is or he or she is selecting the participants and which grouping they are making them to. Okay. So we'll move on to the variables now. Feature, or like we have been talking about different variables. So variables can be of two types. Major classification is that of categorical variable and numerical variable. So whenever we are talking of categorical variable, these are groupings based on some common factors. Okay. Again, these are two classifications. One is nominal and the other is ordinal. Nominal is when it is just a nomenclature, like you read in class nursery, you read in class one. These are nominal variables just to name so that we understand this group of people belong to class one or this group of people belong to class two. Uh, so you can, and these could be anything. It can be class A, class B, doesn't matter whether you like name them as class one or class two. So these are nominal variables. And again, the nominal variables can be like dichotomous or polytomous based on like class one can be having section A, B, C, D, or it can just have section A and B. Depends on how many students you are able to teach in a particular section, or how many like admission have been there on that year. Based on that, you may again make it polytomous or dichotomous. Whenever we're talking of ordinal variables, these are when two or more categories that they can be like grouped, ranked based on their performance. Like whenever we talk about first, second, third in class, these are ordinal variables where we presume one is better than the other in terms of position. So these are ordinal variables. Whenever we're talking of numerical variable, so it is going to take a particular value with respect to time and with respect to the data that's been collected. So here we have a discrete variable or we have a continuous variable. Like discrete is maybe the number of apples in a basket, so which you can count separately as 1, 2, 3, 4, and it is not continuous. You cannot have 1.5 or 1.1 and 1.2 and 1.3 kind of apples. So that is a discrete variable. And continuous is when there is a continuity without a break in between. And even if we like apply certain breaks, those are again like for the sake of our understanding, so like time, which is a continuous variable. The age, that's a continuous variable. So these are different kinds of variables that we work with, and whatever kind of tests we have seen, like you told of Z test, we told of T test, these acts with continuous variables. And whenever we talk of chi-square test, these acts with, like can be with ordinal or nominal variables also. So it depends like what kinds of tests you are using for what kind of purpose. And every test that I told you, every design, every test has a, like every kind of analysis that you do. So we have told here up to F test, there could be other tests or other analysis beyond these things also. So those may have definitely assumptions about the nature of variables, and you need to be very conscious about this, because like what is the nature of the independent variable? Is it continuous in nature? Is it discrete in nature? Accordingly, the type of test that you use, whether you use a regression or whether you use a logistic regression, whether you use a correlation, whether you use a discriminant analysis, all these will depend on the nature of variables, continuous, discrete, that you use in your independent variable and your dependent variable. So accordingly, like when you're talking of categorical variables also, we have like chi-square test, which works on categorical variables. So different natures of different n number of statistical tests are there, but they have their own assumptions regarding the nature of variables, of whether what kind of variable is the independent and dependent variable, and you need to be very quite aware and conscious about these facts before you think of which kind of like test you are going to apply. These are again a set of questions that you have to answer for yourself. Just a quick look into the questions. Can you focus on the questions so that they can see and write?
Yes, ma'am, the questions are very much visible so they can easily understand. So all the participants do have a look on the questions and please try to answer them in the chat box.
Please tell me when they're ready. Huh? Please tell me when we'll proceed.
We have received a response. For the
Yeah.
first question, we have received an answer from Anurani ji, independent variable.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
for the first, we have received only till now. Maybe they are typing for the other two questions. So till then, you can just respond for this question whether the participant is correct or not.
what she has written?
Independent variable.
No, it's dependent variable. It would be dependent variable.
Ma'am, for second one, we have received a response wherein it was mentioned longitudinal.
It's correct. Yeah.
So, ma'am, that answer is correct or is it wrong?
No. The second answer is correct. Whoever has responded longitudinal, it is correct.
Okay. And third, for third one, Hemant Kumarji has responded from Greater Noida. He's saying it is exploratory.
It is better to tell it as a descriptive. Okay. It is exploratory, okay, but it is more aligned, the question is more aligned with descriptive because it is to gain a deep understanding of the phenomena as it is there. Okay, so it's something which is there and you are going to, so it may start with descriptive, but it may become exploratory. Okay, so it may shift later on, but at the start it is descriptive because you are taking a lot of data interview surveys to gain. Purpose is to gain, it's not to explore something new or different from what is there, but first to gain a deep understanding of the phenomena. Then maybe you dig on into deeper or, like unknown facts. But at this stage where the question is focusing on, it is on descriptive. So should I move on with the
Yes, ma'am, you
session?
can continue.
Yeah. So these are the answers. And so for Anu Rani, who has responded, independent variable is which has an effect on the dependent variable. So if you followed the question, it was written like on learning style. So whatever is written after on becomes your dependent variable. So the variable learning style in this study focuses as dependent variable. In some other study, it may act as an independent variable also. But for the problem statement that was given over here, it is a dependent variable. Longitudinal research, one who is responding is correct because the focus of this question was on for a considerable period of time through different methods. And descriptive research design is, as you can see, describe as it is. So to focus on describing and understanding a phenomena without manipulating the variables. That is very important. Describe for now as it is. Then, as a part of exploring further, you can put further probing questions, or you can try to see, like, give some incentives to see how it is working, not working. So, those will become a part of your exploratory research. So now we'll move to the last slab of today's discussion, which is on sampling design. So in sampling design, we understand there are different steps involved. First is the type of universe or the population that we're talking of. So what we talk of, like what is the universe of your study? So whether you can see it or whether you can measure it or whether you can count it or not count it. So these becomes your types of universe, which is your finite or infinite. Like if I talk of you want to count, you want to work on a sample of stars. So is it a finite or infinite universe? Definitely it's an infinite because it's very difficult to like calculate all the number of stars that is there. If I ask you, like you want to work on maybe the number of hairs in your head, on your head. So that's again an infinite universe because it's very difficult to calculate all the number of hairs that you have. So anything that you can understand, in English also we have countable and uncountable nouns, showing that way the types of universe that you're in. The sampling unit, which may be a geographical one such as state, district, village, or a construction unit, flat, or it may be like your family, club, school, or it may be an individual. So when we talk of the studies done on whom, the individual, the organization, because we are working on an individual response. If you're taking data from an organization, because organization is an artificial entity, so some representative member who is in a decision-making position of the organization will respond for the questions that you are asking for. So in that way, what is your sampling unit? Second and third, which becomes very, very important, is the size of your sample. So what is what is your sample size? So it should not be like either excessively large nor too small. And it also depends on the number of questions that you're having in your questionnaire, and it should be some n times of that. So there is a formula for understanding it. So what is the size of your sample? Next comes what is very important, like what is the technique of selecting your sample? In your, if you can see, like in your experimental design, and also in your, like when we talked of non-experimental design, we talked of some randomized techniques. Then some where we talk of quasi-experimental designs also. So what is we talked of, like maybe you saw, like we uh, talked of probabilistic sampling, we talked of non-probabilistic sampling. So these are certain ways that your sampling is done. What is your sampling process? If you talk of like, like snowball sampling, if we talk of like your, which is like you gather like purposive sampling, these are different sampling techniques which may have certain reservations or benefits in terms of generalizability of facts, but again, it has its uses and relevance also based on the different kinds of research that you are doing, and we are trying to focus on it. So, what is the purpose of your study? What you really want to study? And what you want to do with that study? What is the inference that you're going to draw? And what use you put to it generally will define what kind of sample that you are going to work on, or what is the phenomena that you are working on. Like suppose if you want to work with like suppose as we are telling, like as you know now, like this time maybe conjunctivitis have been spreading very much, and maybe I was also suffering a few days back, and even now to some extent. So now if you want to study the effect of conjunctivitis on the eyesight of the person who is having that conjunctivitis, so definitely it will be a purposive sample, because you have to work with people, collect data from people who have suffered or is suffering from that disease. You just cannot inject the virus of conjunctivitis into some healthy person as a part of your, like experimental design and random sampling design. You run with a syringe with a virus of conjunctivitis filled in it, and you just go on pushing an injection with whichever random person you get to find out like what will be the after effect of that on the eyesight is not ethically desirable or does make sense. So in that case, the design that you work with definitely needs to be purposive sampling, and it cannot be in that way random sampling. So you have to use your logic to understand what kind of problem that you're working on and what kind of sampling procedure it demands from you. So we will now discuss some of the characteristics of a good sample design. So it should, as I told you at the start itself, so it should represent, truly representative of the population. So it should be such which results in small sampling error. So you need to control about the sampling error, and there are different statistical processes of doing it. Sample design must be, like viable in the context of funds available for the research study. So all these will come under the parsimony of research heading, like whether you are sensible enough, logical enough, while you are trying to work out on your samples, because it matters time, money, effort, everything. So it must have uh, done in such a way so that systematic bias can be controlled in a better way. So all this you can do through process of randomization, no doubt. But there are again certain cases for which you have to go for purposive sampling. So and maybe randomization in those cases, generalizability maybe you cannot do to great extent in those cases, but really you can find out certain phenomena which is happening, because these people are like already like maybe living with that, or it is a part of their lifestyle, whatever it is. If you want to study a particular phenomena which is not very well prevalent, or you cannot induce that, or you cannot manipulate that, then you have to go for purposive sampling. Sample should be such that the results of a sample study can be applied in general for the universe with a reasonable level of confidence. These can be done if you go for like different kinds of random sampling, maybe simple random sampling, stratified random sampling. There are different kinds of random sampling, and you like bring in more layers to like control for the like biases, and as I told you, for the mix like max, mean, and con principles you can follow over there. So this is a chart which is showing the basic sample designs. So what you can find, there are representation basis, which is a probability sampling and non-probability sampling. So and when there is an like unrestricted and restricted sampling, in case of like whether in terms of element which is selected, they can be put back to the sample again, or they need to be separated after once they have been selected. So based on that, you find element selection technique which is unrestricted or restricted. So can you please focus on the slides so that they can see? Please focus on the slides because the chart is given so that people can see and follow.
It is visible clearly.
Okay, fine. Thank you. So what you see, like it is a probability sampling and it is a non-probability sampling. So when it is unrestricted and probability, you go for simple random sampling. So we talk it, we'll just tell it like, without replacement. But if it is, like restricted, it is with replacement. Something which is non-probability sampling, we just tell it about haphazard sampling or convenience sampling. Whom and whosoever we get, we just take that person and start collecting data from that person. That is haphazard sampling or convenience sampling. When it is a restricted sampling, so as we talk of like we restrict the sample, we try to control for certain biases. So it is a complex random kind of sampling, like cluster sampling people belonging to certain area, and in that area maybe to certain blocks. So when we like bring in more these kind of restrictions, it is called complex random sampling or systematic sampling or stratified sampling. We try to like layer by layer we want to do, so that ultimately what gets represented is the minutest layer of the population which represented well in the sample. And on the, if it is a known probability sampling, then we talk of purposive sampling, like as we discussed just now, quota sampling, judgment sampling, all these are part of purposive sampling. Based on the, you see the word purposive has the word purpose embedded in it. What is the purpose of your study? And you can get the data of that purpose only if you go to that sample. So that is called the purposive sampling. So how we do the design process is we define the target population, Then we have a sampling frame, like from where do we collect data, whom do we collect data, whether it is stratified random sampling, whether it is purposive sampling, whether it is clustered sampling based on our need we do it. Then we specify the what kind of sampling units, then we choose the methods. So sampling frame and choosing methods both are connected. And again, then we go for determining the sample size. Okay, so we do have like, again, with different kinds of sampling methods we have. So those we have systematic circular sampling. So all these different kinds of sampling methods are there, which are again improvisations. Because see, when we talk of randomizations, it is sometimes in kind of social science researches or management studies, it is not always possible to have a totally randomized sample. Again, if you're talking of non-probability sampling, maybe we run the chances of not so good findings where we can generalized facts. So there have been certain sampling techniques designs which are somewhat in between, which has the to some extent or to a great extent rather the strictness of randomization, but also the flexibility given so that the researcher can like do the study properly and not so much restrictions about randomization, like I have to start from here. So systematic circular sampling is one that kind of, like hybrid kind of thing. So we are having different kinds of sampling techniques based on the what kind of researches we are doing, what is the availability of the sample, what is the ease of getting the sample. All this will determine your choosing the sampling methods. So again, there's like different types of sampling designs. Like you can see on the left-hand side, it is probability or random sampling. And on the right-hand side, we have non-probability or non-random sampling. On the left-hand side, you find simple random sampling, stratified sampling, systematic sampling, multi-stage sampling, multi-phase sampling, cluster sampling. These are different kinds of probability sampling. And on the right-hand side, you find purposive sampling, convenience or accidental sampling, quota sampling, and snowball sampling. These are again different kinds of non-probability sampling. What we can just summarize over here, each has its own advantages and disadvantages. It depends on the purpose of your study, the degree of generalizability you want to do, the why you want to do this research, what will be the implication of your study, will define what is the kind of study that you're doing. All these are going to define what kind of sample you will be working with. Again, there's a short question for you. Please focus on the slides so that they can see the question 1, 2, and 3 and answer for it before we can come to the end of the session.
Ma'am, it is already focused.
So I'll request the participants to give a quick reply about question 1, 2, and 3 in the chat box.
Ma'am, for the first and the third question, we have received the answers. For the first, we have received stratified sampling. And for the third, we have received cluster sampling.
Yeah, both the answers are correct. So we should wait for the second one, or I should tell the answer?
Ma'am, you can proceed because already we are late.
Okay, so the second answer is that of snowball sampling. Okay, the reasons are here. Those who've understood stratified and cluster, I hope why it is so you understand. For the snowball sampling, the process is, we tell that the snowball gathers its mass as it rolls on. So the snowball sampling technique is really mapped with that. So maybe what happens, like, you are trying to get data about, suppose specifically with very traditional communities, rural people, it's where you go to like tribal people, these kind of, like, or maybe some unknown community that you're working with. It's very important that you get an entry into the like sample frame before you can collect data from there. So what you try to do, you really try to figure out, like, who is a known, like, lead kind of person with whom you may be having some network, and you can start communicating with that person. So what you try to do is you try to start working with a small group of participants that you know of, and then you can ask them to, like, please bring in your friends, or like introduce you to their friends, or the people that they know of, so that they can act as a linking pin, a bridge in between, and help you to in the data collection process. So this is really helpful when you do not have a complete list of population or access to the list, total population, because they may be fearful of you, they may be apprehensive of you. So many factors happen when you go to the field to collect data. So snowball sampling is used in those kind of situations, and it relies on referrals from existing participants, and that sampling is called snowball sampling. So these were the references that we have used for, like, preparing the discussion sessions, and these are important references for your study also, which you can study these books to, like, collect your data about, or to know more about research methodology and hypothesis. So with this, we come to the end of the session, and maybe I'll stop sharing my slides over here. So thank you all for your participation, and maybe answering the questions and responding to the answers. And thank you all for your patient listening.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Susmita ma'am, for your nice deliberation. To justify with the subject, I think more hours is required, but for a quick reference point of view, this seminar or this webinar would serve a purpose, and it will give some insight to the audience. Shortly, we will seek your guidance for forthcoming events of ICI. We can have a more round of webinar or a lengthy discussion in form of a seminar. Times to come. With these words, I thanks to the ma'am for her time. I also thanks to the audience for their patience hearing. I'm quite sure that this is very fruitful for them. I must be miser if I'm not conveying my thanks to my chairman, CA Dr. Anuj Goyalji, who is kind enough, who has given us opportunity to invent new areas of webinars, new topics of the webinars, which is the interest of the profession or for the members. I think he is the visionary behind all these things. He has given us this opportunity that we should conduct these webinars with the help of our esteemed faculties from the great institution like IITs or IIMs. So, with core of my heart, I thank to leadership of ICI, my chairman, vice chairman, president, vice president, and all council. And I must thanks to the faculties who are instrumental to deliver these lectures. I must be very thankful for the audience for their patience hearing, because for chartered accountants it's quite difficult to spare 2-3 hours in this. So I must thank to C.S. Saloni Jain. I think she is the lady behind all these modalities of these webinars. So, Chairman sir, you would like to add something? Yeah. Just a couple of minutes, please.
So thank you very much, Susmita ma'am, and I'm really grateful to all the audience and the Susmita ji that we were having a schedule up to 5 p.m. and it is around 5:30 p.m. and all of us are here on this very important topic, and we are trying our level best to see that how we can really do something very concrete in the field of the research, and how our younger generation, particularly the chartered accountants, can come forward and take up the initiatives in the research activities and can take part in the research initiatives of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. I am very grateful to our young and dynamic secretary of the research committee, Dr. Amit Agarwal ji and Saloni Jain ji, for being very active, proactive. And we are having ICI International Research Award on 19th of October at Dubai. For the first time in the history of the accounting profession, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India launched this ICI Award for Excellence in Financial Reporting. And this time we are having it at Dubai. So we are trying our level best to see that how we can do something very concrete, not only for our country India, but also for the universe, because the Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam is our motto of the Indian culture. So we do think that whole of the world is a family. So as rightly told by our Prime Minister Modi as the chairman of the G20, that one earth, one family. So whole of the
one future
and one future. So unless until we will be moving in the direction that whole of the earth is one family, then only our future will be secured. So thank you very much, Susmita ji, and so thank you very much all the audience. Thank you very much.
So can I add something over here? So actually your family is a part of my family because my uncle, my father and my husband all are chartered accountants. So I'm embedded in the family of chartered accountants, and it's like homecoming, home connect to me, because I've seen my father and uncle through my childhood and now my husband also. So it's like homecoming to me, and thank you for inviting me for this session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So nice.